Okay, so this is, it started recording and then it stopped recording and now I started recording again. But anyway, so this is going to be the first part of the Computer Concepts Module 2. So this is all about the internet. The book calls it the web, the World Wide Web, the internet, you know, it's all kind of the same thing. So basically, I want to start off by looking at, we all know what the internet is. The internet, well, we actually don't all know what it is. We know how to use it, right? So let me share my screen and do a whiteboard here, and we'll take a look at how what the web is used for. So what do we use the web for? Well, we use it to communicate. And basically that means sharing information. And there are two ways to share information. One is we post stuff. So that means that we push it. That's pushing information to others. And one is that we go and look for information, so we pull information. So either we're pushing information to others or we're pulling information from others. Okay, so that's how we communicate. And that's how we use the web for communication. By the way, when it comes to communicating, we can use, I'm just erasing stuff, we can use email and most of the social media, or all of the social media. There are other ways to communicate using the web. There are forums, and there are, at least there used to be, chat rooms. So there's all kinds of ways to communicate. But realize that basically anything that we're doing on the web is some form of communication. Okay, so that's one reason we use the web, to communicate. What's another reason we use the web? To research information, to find information. And whether it's about, you know, the best TV, you know, at a certain size, or whether it's the best rollerblades, or whether it's information about a car, or whether you just want to find the best price for something, or you need to, you just want to look at, see what the news is right now, what's going on, even researching a school document and getting some information that way. So the web is a huge resource of all kinds of information. You know, when did this particular song come out, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of information. And so we tap into that all the time, whether it's research or like just news and weather, or product information, just looking stuff up. You know, we use it to find all kinds of information, and it's a huge resource for that. What else can we use the internet for, or the web for? I know. More and more we use, you know, Google Drive and iDrive, and well, we use it to store information on. Or files. because we're storing our own stuff. So we're storing files, right? We're storing our own information. And what's the advantage of storing stuff on the internet? Well, the advantage is that it's not on a particular device of ours. So we can just access it using any device that has an internet connection. So obviously that makes it much more convenient. The other thing is that it tends to be more secure. So if you have files that are stored in the cloud, quote unquote, the people who are storing them for you, whether it's Google or Apple or whoever you have, Microsoft, they are making backups of your information. So it's probably even a little bit more secure than you having it on your own computer. Because what happens if I spill coffee onto this computer and it shorts everything out and my hard drive dies? Well, all my files are gone, unless I have backups, right? So it's probably even more secure than just storing stuff on your own flash drive or on your own computer itself. So more and more, we're using it to store our own information on. Having said that, we use the web to play games on. We use the web, you know, you have multiple player games. We use the web to, I don't know, we use it, to stream movies, right? So my television has Netflix on it, and it has Hulu, and it's got all kinds of stuff. It's got Disney Plus. What else? There's just so many apps on my television, and I have a Roku box, and it has it's got gazillions of apps that you can download to it. So there's a lot of streaming movies, and look, I use Pandora and Last.fm, but there are other streaming music services. So we can stream movies, TV shows, documentaries, and music using the web. So we use the web for pretty much everything. We buy stuff on the web, right? There isn't anybody, at least in this part of the country, that hasn't heard of Amazon. And so, you know, we buy stuff on the web all the time. So we do shopping. You can even do grocery shopping. You can buy a car on the internet. Now, I don't know if it's a good idea, but, you know, we kind of use the web for everything. So there you go. Now, I want to talk about what the web is. So I'm going to talk about the internet. And I'm going to define the internet as being a network, will be on the test, of networks. Oops. So the internet is defined as being a network of networks. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means nothing until we know what a network is. So we have to define what a network is. So what is a network? Well, a network is, I define it as being a bunch of computers, with an S there, bunch of computers that are connected to one another. Oops. So a network is a bunch of computers that are connected to each other. And the reason that we have networks is because it saves us money. The first way it saves us money is it makes it very easy to communicate. So if I have a bunch of computers that are connected to one another, so let's say that I have a computer here and a computer here and a computer here. And I'll just do a client server network because that'll make more sense later. So I have all of these computers, and each one of these computers is connected to another computer here. And I know that there are different kinds of networks, and this is just a client-server model. We don't need to explore all of the different kinds of networks there are. So this computer here is called a server, and each computer, and I could have more, is called a client. Each one of the computers that are connected to it is called a client. So this is a client-server model, and this, by the way, let me move my toolbar here out of my way. This is called a network server. And we'll talk about what it does in a second. But basically, you can see that because all of these computers are connected to the server, they're connected to each other, actually. So theoretically, on a network of computers, every computer can access everything else on all other computers that are part of the same network. Now, the reason networks were created so that we could share information very easily and send information back and forth very quickly, and even share programs from one computer to the next without having to even install them on your own computer. So let's say that I have computer A right here. Computer A can actually see, here's computer C and B and D and E, right? So computer A here, this is where I'm sitting. And it doesn't even have to be in the same room as the rest of the computers. And most of the time it wouldn't be. But computer A, I can theoretically, and in an ideal network and in the original networks, I could log, actually in networks today too, if I don't have security shoved on top of it, I can log into or look at the hard drive and all of the files that are on computer E over here. And I can run any program remotely on computer that's installed on computer E. I could update or transfer any files that I wanted to from E to A. So you can see how it makes much more sense, or it makes sense to have that capability, because it saves money and it saves, you know, instead of me having to copy something on a flash drive and getting up and walking upstairs and going to wherever that computer is and then handing the flash drive to them and saying, here you go, copy it over. It's much easier if I can just put it on their computer electronically. There you go, there's the file. Or even better, they don't even need to ask me. They just go grab the file from my computer. Now, what happens is, in the real world, networks tend to have security put on it so that we can't do that. But it's enough, right? Because, you know, I don't necessarily need to be able to see into the payroll office's computer that's on the same network and be able to change my pay rate and do all kinds of stuff. So there's security on the network server, and the network server, basically the server is just another computer. It's just that computer is it used to be that it was more powerful and that it was better computer. But nowadays, it's just kind of the same thing. The only difference is that it has network software on it. So it has a piece of software on it that lets it basically control all of the computers that are connected to it. And it controls the flow of information. And on the server is where when you log into the network, on there it says, okay, this is what you're allowed to do on the network and this is what you aren't allowed to do on the network. So all of the privileges and the security stuff is on the server. So having said that, that's what a network is. So what's a network of networks? Well, a network of networks would be if, oops, I gotta undo stuff. A network of networks would be something like if I connected, let's say I had another server here. Hey, I got the wrong line drawing. Let's say that I have another server here and that I have other computers connected to it. And I know I'm kind of drawing it down here in the corner. Okay. And then, so here, let's just draw this one out. It's a screen, it's a monitor, right? And there's my computer. And if I connect these two networks, anyway, it doesn't matter how I connect them. I can connect it from client to client, or I could connect it from server to server. It doesn't matter. All I have to then do is kind of readjust the network software on both of the servers so that, here, let me draw this like this. There we go. So that it can recognize each other. And now I've just expanded basically my network. So now computer A here's computer Z, can actually access, oops, wrong way, this way, through this computer, through this server, can actually access or could theoretically access anything on computer Z. Now, in real life, like I said, we have security protocols over the top, but that doesn't mean that they can't still send what we call intra-network email. So I could attach a file or send computer Z a file, and it never leaves the network. So we can still share information. We just can't do it directly for the most part. And by the way, administrators, the people who have the high-level passwords, they can look at everybody's stuff from any computer because that's what their security is. So, they can do that. And then if I say, what's the internet? A network of networks. Again, I could connect this server to another network. Whoops, I moved that whole thing. Right, there could be another network of computers here, and I could connect that, and I could connect that. And so we could have a whole bunch of connections, and then we could all share information. And that's basically what we're doing when we're using the internet, is sharing information, right? It's a communication process. It's a sharing of information. It's a sending of information. And that's what networks were built for. So it'll become a little bit more clear when we talk about, how we use the internet. But I have to I have to go to the restroom. So give me 1 second. I'm going to pause this, and then I'm going to come back, and we're going to talk about how to set up how we connect and what we do on the internet and how it kind of works. Okay, so give me 1 second. I'll be right back. My screen sharing is paused, but I don't think I'm paused. Stop video. Hold on, what's going on? Stop share. Pause record. Okay, so I'm back. And what I want to do now is I want to talk about how we use the internet. So let me go back to my whiteboard here and let me get rid of this stuff. And let's talk about how we have an internet connection and what actually happens. So most of the time when we're on the internet, well, actually, let's say that all we have is a computer. So we have a computer and it's hooked up, and here is my monitor and here's the computer. And so I need to get onto the internet. So the first thing that I need is what we call an internet service provider, an ISP. And an internet service provider provides internet service. They also provide us a bill. So what we basically get is we get a little box called a modem and a router. Maybe it's one box that's both, but basically we connect to the ISP. And from the ISP has a connection out onto the internet. Now, our ISP doesn't just have one, and by the way, any computer that's connected to the internet is also called a client. So this computer over here, my computer, computer A right here, is a client. And now you know that even in your own household, you have more than one device that's using your wireless network to have an internet connection, to be connected to your ISP. I have this laptop. There's a laptop outside that's connected. There are 3 iPads. There's actually a desktop. My wife has a Surface Pro, so that's already 7 devices. Then I have a Roku, 2 Rokus. That's 8, 9. My DVD player, my Blu-ray player connects. Both the televisions connect. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that's using the internet and connecting to my ISP through my own network. But then there are others that are connecting to the ISP also. So there are other clients. So there's a whole bunch. So you can see how the ISP is kind of taking the role of that central hub, that connection. It's a node. So it's kind of like a server. Then on the other end, what do we do then? Well, then we like to look at web pages. So in order to view web pages, we need a piece of software that is installed on our computer called a browser. And I use Firefox most of the time, but there's Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer. There's Chrome. There's Safari, which is what the Apple people use. Oh, I left out all of the phones being connected too. There are actually many, many, many different web browsers. We tend to use the one that most people use Chrome nowadays, or Edge. I use, like I said, Firefox, and they're different ones. So we need a browser. And what does a browser do? A browser lets us look at web pages. And we'll talk about what a web page is and what it isn't, I think, next time. But so we then use, say, a search engine like Google, and we type in a query, a search phrase, and we get some hits, and we click on, so let's say that I'm going to Amazon.com. I click on Amazon. Well, what am I doing? Well, I'm sending a signal, my web browser is sending a signal out through my ISP onto the internet, and what it's doing is it's actually connecting to another computer out here, and that computer is called a web server. And a web server is a computer that has web pages on it, and a web page is basically just saved information. And so a web page is actually a file. It equals a file. So a web page is just saved information. A file is saved information. And we have files on our flash drives. We have files on our computers. There are different kinds of files, right? We have text files and video files and graphic files and audio files. We have, those are the 4 kinds of information that you can use and save. And we save them. When we save information, we create a file. And when we have a file that we need to create, we need a place to store it. And so we either store stuff on our flash drives or on our computers, on the hard drives of our computers. A web server basically is just a computer that has a bunch of files on it that are public. Now, there are also HTML files, so they're a certain kind of file. But they're public, and so people can access them. So basically, when we're looking at a web page, when you go to our Canvas page, you're logging into a web server at Chaffey College from your computer, and you're saying, please send me that file, that information. And so it sends you the information back from the web server to our computer, and it shows up on our screen. And then we can see it. Now, anything that you request from the internet, any web page, any image file, anything that you do on the internet, if you can see it on your screen, it's been transferred to your computer. Now, it's not permanently transferred, but it is transferred to your computer. So there's a record of whatever it is that you're viewing on your computer. And so basically the rule of thumb is if you can see it on the screen, it's on your computer. Now, having said that, a web server is that kind of, and by the way, there are many, many web servers, so there aren't just like a handful of web servers. There's a web server at Chaffey on the Rancho Cucamonga campus. Let's say the web server for the White House, whitehouse.org, is in Washington, D.C. I'm pretty sure that one of the main web servers for Amazon, although they have many, they have regional web servers, is in Kentucky, because that's where they're headquartered. I don't know, the Smithsonian Institution, I'm sure that their web server is back east in Washington, D.C., Baltimore. The web server for Cal State San Bernardino is in San Bernardino at Cal State. And it really doesn't matter geographically where the web server is located. And the reason is because the data travels so quickly that it being like, if you log into Chaffey and you go to My Chaffey, or you go to Canvas and the website for this class, it's not really significantly faster than if you go to the Smithsonian.com and the web server is back east, or you go to a website where the web server is in Europe. We don't really notice much of a difference. It is faster the closer you are, but since the speeds are so fast, we can't really tell a difference. There are reasons why certain web pages are slower than others and why the internet can slow down, but typically distance is not one of those reasons. Now, let me tell you a couple of things about our internet connection. First, this connection here from the ISP out to the web servers, the internet part, that is typically the fastest part of the connection. Also, commercial web servers, big web servers, typically have very high, fast connections, so they have an ISP too. but they have very fast connections on their end, especially a company like Amazon, where they have thousands upon thousands of users at any given time. So they need to have a very high-speed connection. We, on the other hand, this part of the connection from our house or apartment to our ISP, that part of the connection is typically the slowest part of the connection. So that's typically the slowest part. And by the way, there are many different connections that we can get. I used to have DSL. Well, I used to a long time ago have dial-up. A dial-up connection is very slow. Then I switched to DSL, a digital subscriber line. And now I have a cable connection. It's just a different kind of it doesn't use a phone line, it uses the coax cable that you kind of screw into the back of the television. So, and the future of the internet is the fastest connection, and some of you may already have it, which is fiber optics, FiOS. A fiber optic connection is the fastest connection there is. But even so, even with a FiOS connection, the slowest part of your connection is between us and the ISP. Out here, there are millions of users or hundreds of millions of users on the internet backbone itself. And on the web server end, depending on the company or who owns the web server, they typically also are expecting, more than a handful of users. Because at my house, this connection can be fairly slow because it tops, there are going to be 3 or 4 devices using it at the same time. If each one of it, there's only 3 of us, my wife and my daughter. If we're all on the computer looking at web page stuff, then that's 3 devices that are connected. Maybe somebody's streaming some audio at the same time. So there's 4 devices that are connected and actively using it. There may be another 1 or 2, although it gets a little bit hard to multitask like that, to have more than one. I can't look at this computer and be using my phone, and I guess I could on the internet too. So yeah, but anyway, my point is that the connection between us and our ISP typically has the fewest users, simultaneous users, and out on the other side of the ISP, and even the ISP itself, there are many, many thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of people using those connections. So they have to be much faster. So having said that, I've defined kind of all of that stuff. So let's talk about, let me look at the book. Let's talk about, how every web page is defined. So every web page needs to have a unique address. And that address is called a URL. A uniform resource locator. I did that the hard way. Here, let's do it this way. URL, uniform resource, it's a C, locator. We tend to call this a web address, but a web address is a little bit tricky because a web address can mean multiple things. So a uniform resource locator is really the whole thing that's in the address bar of your web browser. So I'll give you an example of a URL, and I'll just make one up. And they typically start off with something like this: http://www.amazon.com/. slash, my picture's in the way. I'm just going to make something up here. Dickens / Tale of Two Cities dot HTTML. Okay, yeah, that's very long, and I apologize. But I just want to talk about the different parts of the URL really quickly. So the first part here, HTTP, that stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And it sounds very complicated, but it's not. A protocol is basically just an agreement or a standard that we use and that's agreed upon. And a transfer protocol, so the TP in here, doesn't stand for toilet paper, it's transfer protocol, just means that it's a standard that we use to transfer information. And the first part is hypertext. And hypertext basically is the old term for what we now call links. Links are really what we use to navigate the internet. We click on links to go from one page to the next and from one website to the next. It makes our lives easy because we don't have to type in URLs to go from one place to another. So we get a whole bunch of links, or we're on one page and there's a link to another page, and so that's kind of how we surf the web. So hypertext is what, because it used to only be text that you could click on. And so hypertext became hyperlinks, and that just turned into links. And so basically HTTP just means it's the standard that we use to transfer web pages that have links in them. So that's what this HTTP means. Now this part right in here, the www.something.something, that's called a domain name. Domain names have to be unique. Name. So there can be only one www.amazon.com. There can be only one www.microsoft.com or www.chafee.edu or www.redcross.org. So the domain name is registered. You have to pay for it. It's not very much. I think it's like 20 bucks a year or something like that. But it has to be, they check to make sure that nobody else has that registered yet. And if you pick a domain name that nobody has, you can use it. This .com or .edu or .org or .mil or library, LIB, or there's a whole bunch. .com means commercial, by the way, commercial website. EDU means an educational facility, but it's really only a college or a university. Mil means military, so you'll see like army.mil. Library, LIB, is for libraries. There's also .net. .org is for nonprofits. .net is for network providers, although .com is the one that most people use because it's what we assume everything is a .com. So those are the kind of the ones we're running out of, but running out of good domain names. But anyway, that's what a domain name is. And then everything after that is kind of the path. So this is like the path to get to here. And everything after the last forward slash, that is what you're actually looking at. So in this case, I'm at Amazon and I'm looking at Dickens stuff, but I'm looking at the book Tale of Two Cities, or the web page taleoftwocities.html, TOTC. So this, anything that's after the last part. Here, let's take a look at a web browser and take a look at some real URLs. So I have to share the correct screen here. And now I'm sharing this one. So let's take a look at some real URLs. And I'll search for, I always say rollerblades, so I might as well search for them. I never do. Spelled them wrong. So let's just click on this, and then I'll look up here in my, what we call the address bar. And you can see here, it starts off with HTTPS. That means the S stands for secure, so it's an encrypted connection. Then I have the middle part here, rollerblade, www.rollerblade.com. That's the domain name. Then I have this bit, which is the, USA bit, and I just clicked on it. And then I'm in Skates, but I'm not actually looking at a real page yet. So let's go, holy crap, there's $800. Okay, let's look at those. So now my URL has gotten a lot more complicated. And so I'm just going to go over here to the right. And you can see this last bit is the actual page that I'm on. Now, this is a dynamic page, so it's a little bit weird, but it's difficult. But anyway, this is the URL, this whole thing. What else do I have? I have search with Amazon. Oh, never mind. I can go back. And let's scroll down here a little bit. And let's look at this URL. Now this one's all ready. It's also a secure connection because it's HTTPS. It's goodhousekeeping.com, so that's the domain name. It's under health products and best roller skates. So this is the best roller skates page. And I guess these pink ones are pretty good. So these are the best roller skates. And by the way, there are links on this page, right? This shop now, here, let's click on these. These shop now ones, those are links that open another or take me to another page. So here and now I'm at Amazon and I'm looking at these Blade Runner by Rollerblade Advantage blades. So these are links. And by the way, these are all links, and so are the images. That's why it's called hyperlink. It used to be called hypertext because it was only text that could be a link. Like this, right? This is text, and that's what used to only be able to be a link. But anyway, so having said that, let's get out of here. Oops, let's close this. And that's what a URL is. Let me stop sharing. So I'm going to create another lecture for this module. We're going to talk about what a web page is, what a website is, and some other things that are in this chapter of the book. I will post the reading, and so there you go. Yeah, and so I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye. So let me stop recording. There we are.